Let's go.
Wednesday afternoons.
Perhaps not all players are meant for the Premier League. The challenges of the Premier League. And I thought, I've always known that the Premier League is a different ball game, literally. And do you think that there are players that aren't meant for the Premier League? For instance, let me just say, if we had so we had Ronaldo in the Premier League. He did play in the Premier League. But do you think if we had like Lionel Messi, he wouldn't have been as outstanding as he was if he had played in the Premier League? Because that's what I'm thinking. That's what came to my head straight away. And I'm thinking, right, so if there are some players that aren't necessarily meant to play in the Premier League, not because they're not good, but they're just not fitted or suited for the challenges of the Premier League. Do you think if we had players like Ronaldo and over, do you think they would have kind of flopped?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, I think. That I mean, it's often said with good reason that the Premier League is the most most competitive league in the world, which it probably is. I mean, the Spanish league is pretty good, the Italian league, the French league. I mean, maybe they're all a bit dominated by the best top 2 or 3 teams, but then that's probably true in this country as well, maybe the best 4, 5, 6 teams. But it's a tough competitive league, so I can imagine that not every player has got the personality, the correct mentality. You've got to be mentally strong as well as physically fit and physically strong. But I sometimes think that from the spectator's point of view, it's very easy to not even think about in any sport really the role that mentality plays in it. And I think the more so, for example, in a game like tennis, where you've got no team to hide with or to fall back on. You're on your own. And even a very well established tennis player, if he starts off and doesn't sort of start off well and loses a couple of games to an upstart or someone who's not as established, it will be very easy for us mere mortals for the confidence to just crash. And you're aware there's a lot of people watching every movement of the television cameras and everything else. And you've got to be so mentally tough. And obviously over a 3 or 5, best of 3 or 5 sets in tennis, there's a lot of ups and downs, swings and arrows, or not swings and arrows, but you know what I mean? You have good games, good poor games, and so it goes. You've got to have that mental strength. But in football too, you have, and I was watching on Sunday again. We're quite close to the front, and you hear the players, and you see the power of the game, the speed of the game, and they'll pass the ball. They're usually very good at that. They're fit players, but it's tough, because effectively in the Premier League and possibly the other leagues. But the Premier League teams cancel each other out. They've got the best players in the Premier League. Obviously, some of the top teams are even better. But the defences effectively nullify the attacks. And that's what makes it the great game that it is. I mean, if goals were 15 a dozen, they would lose their value. It's the fact that goals, to a large degree, not always, but to a large degree, are relatively scarce. It makes them even better in celebration, etc., when they're scored. If it were too easy, it wouldn't be the same game. So you've got the best.
Soft family and the ladies, Dr. Gladys and Phantom and Rose. We all have a lovely show every weekday. So join us for a lovely show.
Say hello to Phantom, Dr. Glad.
To a large degree, not always, but to a large degree, are relatively scarce. It makes them even better in celebration, etc., when they're scored. If it were too easy, it wouldn't be the same game. So you've got the best elite athletes, footballers playing each other, and it's that competitiveness which makes it. Now, as you suggest, perhaps not everybody has got that mentality, that mental strength to do that job. You might say particularly a goalkeeper is in need of that, because there is the one person who, if he makes a mistake, the team goes 1-0 down. Whereas if a player on the field makes a mistake, that's not always the case. So goalkeepers have to be particularly strong-minded, because they do inevitably make the odd mistake, even the best ones, and that then must sap a bit of confidence out of you. So you've got to be tough. And, you know, some of the stadiums in the Premier League hold 60, 70,000 fans. And that's a heck of a lot of people to play football in front. Now, going back to what you asked, Ronaldo, of course, did play in the Premier League, to be fair, for Man United a good few years ago now, earlier in his career. And I think it's fair to say he did shine like a beacon. I mean, he was essentially a winger in those days. He was quick. He was able to go past players. Free kicks, he was his speciality sometimes was that he could get the ball up and over the wall and then into the top corner of the goal. He had a real technique, and the way I can see him doing that now, he had a real technique for scoring those goals. So yeah, I think he stood out, and he was quite young in those times. It was early in his career. And let's face it, ever since, wherever he's gone since, he's shone as well. It's only the last few years when he's lost some of his pace and his agility, perhaps, that and I think he's now possibly retired. I'm not sure if he's retired or whether he's playing this last season. But we know he did well in the Premier League for all its toughness. What we'll never know is how Lionel Messi would have done. You know, you can remember watching him in the last Euros, World Cup going back, and he's a magic man, a bit like Maradona, who similarly was an Argentinian, wasn't he? Messi he was a luxury in the sense that he always came across visually as a bit of a lazy player, and you could argue he was. He was a bit of a luxury because he didn't track back to help with the defence. And I never saw a manager from the sideline telling him to do so, because they knew his abilities were up the front or near the front, giving the ball, and he just weaves his way around 3 or 4 players and usually ends up putting the ball into the goal as well. He was a phenomenon. And therefore, in my opinion, and we'll never know, but in my view, if he played in a British team, and I personally am sad he didn't, I wish he had have done, I think he would have been just as special, just as brilliant, even though you might say with the competitive league, he might have got kicked up in the air a bit more. Who knows? You'd like to think refs would protect players like that. But I think...
Safemo and the ladies, Dr. Gladys and Phantom and Rose. We all have a lovely show every weekday. So join us for a lovely show.
Say hello to Phantom.